Welcome to episode 207. Today on Book Chat, I am interviewing Andre Refig, narrator of audiobook Dangerous to Know, Jane Austen's Rakes and Gentlemen Rogues. Stay tuned. Hey everyone, I am your host, Tamara Ford, and welcome to Book Chat here on the Shelf Addiction Podcast. If you're new here, welcome. If you're returning, as always, welcome back. Here on Book Chat, we get bookish with roundtable book discussions, book recommendation lists, interviews, and more. If you'd like to check out book reviews and other bookish posts, please visit shelfaddiction.com. Now a bit about today's guest. Andre Refig is an actor, singer, and voiceover artist. His work has taken him across the UK and Europe and has included a wide variety of different genres, from Shakespeare to new writing, opera to modern musicals, and voiceover work to screen work. He's also going to be sharing with us an anthology that he recently narrated called Dangerous to Know, Jane Austen's Rakes and Gentlemen Rogues. All of Andre's social media links are below in the show notes, so if you'd like to connect, you know where to find him. If you'd like to comment on something you've heard during today's episode, you can find me on Twitter at Shelf Addiction, or you can call in and leave an internet voice message via SpeakPipe. The links for everything you'll need are below in the show notes. Thank you for joining me today, Andre. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, absolutely. I'm very excited to talk to you today because I love audiobooks, if you don't know.
Yeah.
And my audience loves audiobooks. So it's always a pleasure to talk to a narrator or a voice actor. Yeah. And you're that. So welcome.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So let me start with this. Do you prefer to be called a voice actor or audiobook narrator?
I think I'm happy with either, to be honest. I mean, in terms of what I've done is probably more voice acting. Mm-hmm. But if someone wants to call me an audiobook narrator, that's fine too. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. I just don't want to offend because, some people are really funny about that. So, Awesome. So, okay, let's get a little bit into how you began narrating audiobooks, because from what I understand, you have stage credits that include musicals and children's theater and operettas. How did you get into audiobooks?
Well, I think so I've been working as an actor now for about 10 years or so. About 5 years ago, I decided to try my hand at voice acting and voiceover work in general. And then I suppose it was maybe 2 years ago, I looked into working in audiobooks. I'd always been into audiobooks in terms of I'd always listened to them since I was a little child, really. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, well, it's something I've always loved, so I might as well try and see if I can do it myself. So there we are. And then I did a few volunteer audiobooks for a company called Listening Books, and those went down quite well. So I decided to go more fully into it, and joined ACX, and here I am.
Awesome. So do you think that your theater training has affected your approach to audiobook narration?
I would say definitely. I think in theatre, obviously, most of it is text based, and it always starts with a text, and especially when it comes to auditions, so much of that is about having to read text off the bat, having to sight read, and having to deliver performance, and I think that helps a lot with reading an audiobook. Yeah.
What's your favorite thing about narrating an audiobook?
Well, many different things. One is the fact that, as opposed to theatre work, I don't have to learn any lines. That's great.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is being able to play so many different characters, being able to read so many different characters, as opposed to in theatre where you usually only play one person. You're creating the whole world yourself, and that sort of control and at the same time freedom that comes with that is really exciting, I think.
Yeah. Well, speaking about creating the world, I say narration can really add a lot to a story or really take it away. How do you go about, developing what you think, your vision of how these characters sound, when you record, for the book?
Well, obviously the first thing I do is just read the story for myself, so that I get the big picture. I get the whole story in my head. And I sort of look at the ways in which the characters are described by the author, but also the ways they behave, the way other characters in the story react to them. And it sort of builds a picture of the way the character sounds. And I do have a list of different vocal styles that I can use. But sometimes the voice just comes in the doing of it and sort of in the practicing of it, without even thinking in too much detail. If I've worked on the story, if I've worked on the character a lot, the voice just appears in a way, just from all the work I've done. It appears almost subconsciously, because it's then ingrained in my mind. And suddenly, I'll give a character a certain voice quality, like I'll give him a lisp or maybe a high pitched tone or something. And that won't even be something I would have thought about consciously and gone, oh, I think this character needs that. It would have just happened because I would have thought about the characters in the story, and it just appears naturally in a way.
Yes, absolutely. So I have wondered about this. I listen to a lot of audiobooks.
Yeah.
So when I listen to long audiobooks, I always wonder, I know they are not sitting there for 8 hours a day reading. So how do you come back to the exact same voice every time for each character?
Well, there's certain things certain audiobook narrators do. I mean, one example is sometimes just to use a coloured marker pen, if you're using a hard copy, or if you're on a tablet or something, just to highlight in a particular colour the same character, so that each time you see it, you know immediately, that the association of that colour immediately brings you back to the character. It's sometimes, and then the other thing is that often you do make mistakes, but it's fine because you can always correct those in the edit. I mean, I'll sometimes read a character and then realize that by the end of the sentence, oh no, it wasn't that one. And I'll just stop it and read the sentence again. Thankfully, it's none of it is live.
Indeed, true.
So, mistakes are fine as long as you don't make too many of them. It's okay.
So let's say you get in a situation where you have to keep stopping for mistakes. Is it hard to pull yourself back into the story?
Yeah. I mean, I generally don't make that many mistakes. It'll be the odd one here and there. So that's not too bad. I think if I was making a lot, then it probably would be hard to carry on within the narrative, because you do want to keep some continuity going. Otherwise it would feel very stunted and would be difficult, as you say, to stay within the story. But the odd mistake here and there is fine. The way I see it is a bit like if you're reading someone's writing, like a draft copy of some writing, and there's the odd spelling mistake here and there. I don't think it really matters. But if there's constant mistakes the whole way through, then it's hard to concentrate on what's happening. And for me, it's the same thing. If I'm constantly making mistakes, then yes, it would be very difficult to stay within it. But the odd one here and there, it really doesn't, I don't think it bothers me that much.
Yeah, that's cool. Because that's true. I mean, as a listener, anything that is not consistent, constantly, it really pulls us out of the listening experience.
Yeah. So,
yeah, that's awesome that you think about that. And I think all narrators do, generally speaking, I think.
Yeah.
So tell me, what do you do as far as accents? Because clearly you have a natural British accent. Do you do other accents?
I do. I mean, I do an American one. I'd rather not try it for your listeners, just in case. But no. So obviously, this is my natural accent. I do a lot of different British accents. Working class, upper class, and everything in between. Different regional accents and foreign accents as well. My native tongue is French, so I obviously do a French accent as well. In the clip that you may be playing, there's certainly a prominent French character in there as well.
Yes.
So yeah, I think it's that's it basically.
So do you tend to kind of just stay toward, books that take place in, I don't know, England or, in Britain or France or someplace else where you can kind of slide into it easily?
Yeah, I think those would probably be the ones I would tend to do more. I think, again, so in one of these stories one of these short stories in this anthology, there's an American character, but then it's just a small role within a larger story where the vast majority of the characters are British. So I probably would focus more on that. And then if I need to do the odd, American character here and there, then that's fine. But I probably wouldn't focus on reading a story where the main protagonist and where most of the characters are American, just because I know there are so many other people out there who would do it better.
Exactly.
Yeah, focusing probably on British and then also French characters would be my main focus, yeah.
So I'm curious, though, when you do your American accent,
yes.
What region do you think it sounds like it's from?
Well, this particular one that I did, because it's based in 1800, it's a sort of almost mid-Atlantic, if that means anything at all, because it's a sort of old-fashioned American accent, which you would hear in, old films in the 30s and 40s, and which is almost sort of a little bit British. It's sort of in between.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that in that particular case, it would be. Otherwise, if I was to do a general American accent, I'm not sure where it would be from. I think it would just be. I don't know. I don't think it would be from a specific region, but just a general standard.
Cool. So, okay, you told me earlier that you listen to audiobooks for a long time.
Yes.
So, do you have any favorite narrators that you like to listen to?
Well, yeah, there are a few actually. I mean, I've listened to the whole of Harry Potter by Stephen Fry. I found that great. There's a narrator called Hugh Fraser, a British actor who's narrated a lot of Agatha Christie, sort of a lot of Hercule Poirot and that sort of thing. And I've really enjoyed him as well. Yeah. And, I have quite liked the late Roy Dotrice, who narrated the first 5 books in, George R. R. Martin's Song of Ice and Fire as well. I think he did a good job on that.
Nice. I've been meaning to read those or listen to those rather. I hear they're quite amazing on audiobooks. So
yeah.
Yes, awesome.
It's quite epic.
Yeah, I know. I love that show. I need to read the books. So obviously you enjoy books as well. So you have probably a few favorite authors. Are there any authors like on your quote unquote wish list that you love to read something for them?
Well, yes, but I think they're taken already, unfortunately. I mean, as I say, I love George R. R. Martin, for example. I love Terry Pratchett as well. I love Agatha Christie. But yeah, most of those have already been recorded. In terms of new books that haven't, I don't really know. I mean, I'm always on the lookout, but yeah, not sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, the book we're talking about today is historical fiction, and so I'd love to know, what is your favorite genre to narrate? Do you like historical fiction best? I mean, you mentioned a few older things, so or do you like others as well?
I do like historical fiction a lot. I think the styles I tend to read would be historical fiction, fantasy, and then maybe crime and whodunits, those sort of styles. What I like about historical fiction is you feel immersed in a certain world which is real, but at the same time removed from the one you actually live in. Whereas, in fantasy, it's a completely different world, or in crime fiction, it's the same world in which we live in. In historical fiction, it is the same world, and it's true, and all the sort of the places are real, all the things that people do are real, but obviously all the individual characters are fictional, and I think I like the combination of those two things, of the fact and the fiction, in a way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Okay, so tell me, are you working on anything cool right now?
Yes, so the book I'm working on right now is called Dangerous to Know, Jane Austen's Rakes and Gentlemen Rogues. And it's a series of short stories based on Jane Austen and featuring the sort of, shall we say, the cads, the Rakes characters. So the bad boys in a way. And it's either their backstories or prequels or simply parallel stories featuring them as the central character. Obviously in Jane Austen novels, they're always sort of outsider characters, whereas in these, they're the central character. And it's sees, sometimes it explains how they got to be the way they are. Sometimes it just explores another side of their personality. And it's a great set of stories.
I love anthologies. You get a little bit of everything, and you get to try out different authors.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a very big range, and and it is really interesting because obviously as an audiobook narrator, each time you start on a new short story, obviously it's written in a slightly different style because each author has their own stamp on it, and it's really exciting to explore these different styles, and it keeps it really interesting. If you love an author, then it's great reading a whole novel. But at the same time, it's really exciting to explore writing by so many different authors and trying to get a grip on the different style of writing and the different mood and the different attitudes, and it's great.
So instead of with one book, you might have to deal with obviously one author, maybe two if it's two people writing it. But do you get notes from 11 different authors on this type of job?
Well, so far I haven't had that much, which is hopefully a good sign. I deal primarily with Christina Boyd, who's the editor, and she's been absolutely lovely. She's always given me her own notes, and then she's always been the contact point between myself and the author of the particular story that I've just recorded. And sometimes I do get notes, and but they've been fairly minimal so far. So fingers crossed, it's all going well.
Awesome! Congratulations on that.
Yeah, thanks.
That's good. Okay, well, let's take a really quick listen to Dangerous to Know, and this is an excerpt from A Wicked Game, and let the audience listen, and let's talk about it after.
Right.
My heart beat faster, wondering what game she played, but I continued across the entrance hall. Fitzwilliam paused by the front door and eyed me expectantly. "Will you join me for a ride across the fields, Wickham? I should be glad of your company." I hesitated. "No, I will not detain you. I have a matter to take care of first." He nodded amiably and left. Fitzwilliam had no sooner taken his leave than Lady Harlow emerged from the dining room and approached me. Without a word, she slipped into the library across the hall and gestured for me to follow. I stood rooted to the spot. This was madness, insanity, and it was decidedly improper. Thrusting aside my misgivings, I strode across the empty hallway and through the double doors, and regarded her in apprehension as she shut them behind us with great care. "You take a dangerous risk," I protested in a low voice as I turned to her. "If anyone should see us—" She leaned back against the door. "No one will see us, and what I have to say to you will take but a moment." The blood rushed, pounding in my ears. I made no reply. "I hope you will forgive me," she whispered, and drew closer. "The brandy last night made me tired. I fell asleep before I could come to you." When I said nothing, still nursing my pique, she leaned forward. "Oh dear, you are angry with me, I think." The scent of violets teased me as she pressed her lips fleetingly on mine. I groaned and reached for her. "Non," she chided gently and pushed my hands away. "Not here, not now. But soon, mon chéri, soon. Leave it to me." I bit back a sigh of frustration. I wanted her desperately. But for now, Her promise would have to be enough.
Okay, so let's talk about this short story. From what I can tell, it's a young George Wickham, and he is from Pride and Prejudice, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's right.
And he has a rendezvous with a French widow. And I did hear your French accent, which was very good. What did you think about this short story?
Oh, well, it was really exciting. I mean, George Wickham is probably one of the more famous of the characters in the whole anthology, actually. Most people will know Pride and Prejudice. And what they know of George Wickham is that he's a cad, that he sort of treats Lydia Bennet very badly. And he's not a character that many readers would sympathize with. Initially, they're taken by him and think he's quite charming, and then they see him for what he is, and no one would really be on his side, certainly not by the end of it. But this story obviously approaches him as the hero in a way, and he initially appears to be quite a nice chap, quite a nice guy, just obviously quite excitable, maybe a little bit naive, not quite impetuous, not in control of himself very much. But then to start with, he's probably in his very early 20s. And then you sort of see his being seduced by this more mature, wily French widow who then completely disillusions him. He ends up he falls in love with her, and then he ends up being completely disillusioned with love and becomes a bit like she is, and someone who will use other people for their own benefit.
I see.
And it does make you sort of feel for him, which is not something I'd ever done before. But at the same time, it is quite thrilling, and it's quite exciting following the sort of love story, or maybe lust story is more appropriate way of describing it.
Yeah, definitely that. I mean, the couple of minutes I listened to, I'm like, oh, sorry, George. He thought he was going to do something, and sorry. But yeah, so tell me, how did you do the widow's voice? Because that is something I always like to know from male narrators, is how, because you nailed this woman's voice and she sounded really nice. And, sometimes the male narrators try to do that falsetto thing and you don't do it.
No.
Thank goodness you don't do it.
No.
Tell me how you developed the women's voice.
Well, I think that ultimately I know that I'm never actually going to sound like a woman.
Yeah.
And I think for me, as a narrator, it's not about necessarily sounding exactly like the way that character would sound. It's about giving a flavor of the character. And if I just lighten my voice a bit, if I just raise it just a little, I think it's clear that it's a woman.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be literal. It doesn't, because as you say, if I was trying to do the whole falsetto thing, it would just sound comical. And I mean, that's can be used.
Yeah.
There's a time and a place to use that as well.
Exactly.
But, if you want a character that is serious and that the audience are going to believe and they're not going to laugh at, then I think it's unnecessary. And you could just lighten it a bit, and it will make the audience know that it is a woman, and that's all you need to do, really.
Yes.
I think.
I agree with you. And I think you did a great job with it, because I've heard some bad ones, let me tell you. But
I can imagine, yeah.
Yes. Okay, so tell me, did you record this in your home studio then?
I did, yes. I recorded it in the same place where I'm talking to you from right now.
Cool. Tell me what your studio atmosphere is like when you're recording a book.
Quite warm. It's very quiet. It's quite a small space. I sort of made it myself. So, all I can see really is the microphone in front of me and my laptop or a tablet or a book. With my sort of my reflection filter in front of me, and then I have boards on either side and a blanket sort of over the top. And so it's quite enclosed, but in a way that's good because it means I'm fully immersed in the story. There's no distractions. It's just me and the story.
That's awesome. And I'm very glad to hear you have a blanket, because when I tell people put a blanket over you if you are, they're like, what? Yeah. I'm like, yes, please just get the blanket. But you understand.
It works. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
So when you record at home, do you also do your own editing, or do you have a director or a producer helping you?
No, I do all the editing myself. I step out of the little studio and just do it in my study, in my room, just on my laptop on Adobe Audition, which is a very good quality editing suite. And that's it really. I mean, I like the fact that I have control over it. Obviously it's more work for me and it takes more time. But at the same time, I have much more control over everything that comes out.
Yes.
And I feel that sometimes I'm more critical of myself than other people might be, in the sense I will put more work into making it sound good.
Which us, the listeners, appreciate, because that editing life is real. I have spent a long time editing things, not a book, but a podcast, obviously. I can spend hours editing a 30-minute podcast if I really want to nitpick it to death, Yeah.
I think probably because I do other voiceover work as well, if I'm, say, recording a 1-minute explainer video, for example, I would probably spend a lot more time relative to that 1 minute on the editing, just to get it the sound absolutely perfect. Obviously, because an audiobook in the end is a long, is a lot of material. I will spend a lot of time editing it, but I won't spend as much. So if I did a 1 minute explainer video, I might spend a couple of hours editing it, or maybe not a couple of hours, but at least an hour editing it, which is 60 times the amount of finished material. If I'm recording a 1 hour book, a 1 hour short story, I'm not going to spend 60 hours editing that. But I will spend a fair bit of time on it.
Yeah, so I'm very curious, since you do everything from start to finish.
Yeah.
So far, and it's not, as of this recording date, the book is not done, but how many hours to date do you think you spent on Dangerous to Know?
I haven't counted. I wish I had. I'm doing other jobs at the same time. So it's not clear to me, because I'm not sort of doing, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. I sort of do it sometimes during the day, sometimes in the evening, sometimes at the weekend. I fit it around other things, and I fit other things around that. And I'm working on several different projects. So I can't tell you honestly how many hours I've done, but it's probably quite a lot. A rough estimate, if there's an hour's worth of, if there's, say, one of the shortest of the short stories is about an hour, I probably spent 3 hours recording it, to get it right. And then probably another 4 or 5 hours preparing it. And then maybe another 6-7 hours editing it. So that's, how much is that? 15, maybe less, something like that.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It gives me a whole new appreciation for you. I'm going to tell you, like, oh my gosh, that's insane. But the end result is worth it, though.
Well, hopefully, yeah.
Yes, I think it will be. I've heard some of it. Yeah. So you guys, you can count on me. It's good. You know what I mean?
Good.
So thank you so much for sharing that snippet with us. Before we wrap things up, I would love to know, do you have any advice for people who are aspiring to narrate audiobooks?
I'd say 2 main things. One, just listen to loads and loads of audiobooks. Listen to different styles, listen to different narrators. And the other is practice yourself. Take a book you like and read it out loud. You can record yourself doing it, or sometimes just read it out loud to yourself. So those I'd say were the 2 big things. And the more you do both of those, I just think the better you'll become.
Awesome. That's great advice. Great advice. Okay, so thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate the time you spent.
Thank you.
My pleasure. If you are a Jane Austen fan, then I definitely recommend you pick up a copy of the audiobook Dangerous to Know, Jane Austen's Rakes and Gentlemen Rogues. You can find an Audible link below in the show notes. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, take care, everyone. If you enjoyed today's episode and would like to show your support, there are a few things you can do. Head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave a positive 5-star review. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Most importantly, you can share this podcast with friends and family that love pop culture, from books and audiobooks to TV and movies. I'll see you next time here on the Shelf Addiction Podcast.